Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. That's so nice of you to come, Anka. So late, isn't it? Not too bad.
No,
You guys
not
are
too
all
bad, not too
muted.
bad.
Not too
No,
bad.
good to see you.
Thank you. Good to be seen, right? That's what I always tell everyone. All right. We can give everybody a minute or two. Good morning, Megan.
Hey, Jen. Good morning. Hi, everyone. How are you doing?
It's early. Are you in Central or are you in Eastern?
Eastern.
Oh, okay. Not that early then, right?
Nope.
By 9, given my age, I feel like I've been up for half a day already, I never believed my mom when she would say that she, got up earlier and earlier the older that she got. I believe now. So funny. All right. Well, I did have a couple of slides, but I don't feel any need to necessarily bring them today. And so I'm grateful that I definitely see some faces out there. So I was happy that people came. I know that Megan had mentioned that this was a topic that was of interest in some of the feedback that you all had been receiving. And I know that we're taping this today, so perhaps anybody who's not able to make it would be able to watch it later and garnish some information and hopefully take that and be able to run with it if they wanted to perhaps consider contracting in their future. But I did not know if anyone had any burning questions that they wanted to ask this morning, or if you wanted to see my slides, I would be happy to share those too. My slides are geared towards a very introductory sort of path to contracting and to our field. So not just contracting in general, but to our field and the options out there, the things that I've thought of, things like that. So I can go ahead and share those if those would be fun and exciting. Let's see, start screen share. Just gonna share my whole darn screen because I'm not really sure how else to do it. So it's so funny that I just mentioned that, right? So you've got to be your own IT person. That's a really big part of contracting, and you've got to figure it out all on your own. But I thought I would share with you a little bit today about sort of my editorial office review. Oh, I see somebody. Oh, thank you. Oh, good. I'm glad more people are still flowing in. So I thought I would share just a few slides today. I want you to stop me. I want you to ask me questions whenever you would like to, but this is an editorial office review. It is primarily geared towards, because I started my own company a couple of years ago and it's called Editorial Evolution. I also contract with Origin Editorial. That's my main sort of job, my main contract. You actually shouldn't use the word job if you're going to contract because it is a contract. It is not a job. There are no benefits. There are no traditional sort of benefits and time off and all the things that come along with a quote unquote job. But when we're talking about the word benefits, the benefits are immeasurable in terms of your personal life and how you can manage yourself and your own little entity and your own company, if that's what you wanted to create. Some of the things that I've come up with in terms of what some of the roles and things that you could do as a contractor or as an editorial office professional are listed here. Like I said, these slides are actually, I'm repurposing these slides because I felt them to be so useful for this particular topic. But then I also saw some emerging fields. We obviously are seeing a lot of chatter about some of these things, particularly in terms of the authoring editors and the customer service angle to your author, who is your customer at these points, right? There's no question about that. And these are the folks that you work with, whether you're in an editorial office or whether you're a contractor. So it doesn't really matter. And I think the point that I'm driving home here is that your function is still the same, whether or not you're a contractor or if you're a full-on staff employee. And we were just talking about, it's funny, I was just talking with the ISMTE staff, and it's just the differences that we have now. You have all caught up to me as a contractor, and you are now working at home. I've been doing this for 10 years, working from home. I saved 3 hours on my commute per day. So I would drive into Malden an hour and a half one way and an hour and a half the other. And I worked for a large publisher. I worked for Wiley, John Wiley and Sons in Malden, Massachusetts. And I live in Pembroke, Massachusetts. So it is a long way from the South Shore of Massachusetts to the North Shore of Massachusetts. And a lot of traffic, to be quite honest. I wouldn't even say that the miles are long, but the journey to get there is long. So when you work as a contractor, you can just, it's awesome. You can work at home, you can have fun, you can step away, you can step back. There's no office hours in terms of what you're doing, but you create your own. The most important thing that you have to have if you're a contractor is a good ethics work sort of mindset. You need to be able to do it. If you can't do it and you need to be in the office, then that's a complete different consideration. But your actual office is no longer required. You don't have to be there. You need a chair. I blur my background because my background's a hot mess and I don't want anybody else to see it. But it's a great opportunity to be able to play with technology, and nobody needs to know any of those things. And these are just some of the things that you need to know if you're going to be a contractor. You need to know your meeting requirements. You should have somebody look at your contract. You need to talk about things like what are the PTO situation. There is no PTO. Let me actually just rephrase that. You need to work out how that's going to work for your contract. You need to talk with who you're contracting with, if there's going to be any type of sort of share back coverage, or if you need to take your work on the road with you, you need to figure that out. There's a lot here, I know that, but it is project-based work. You need to review that contract for all of these things, and you need to make sure that you keep all your records. You need to think about all of the bullets down below, like liability, healthcare, life insurance, cyber policy, what you're going to do about IT, and how you're going to file your taxes. Those are all things that you need to consider if you want to become a contractor. You need to think about what you want to charge, because you are in charge. You can do whatever you want, but you need to consider your taxes. You need to make sure that your taxes are incorporated into whatever the rate is that you might want to consider. And there's no annual review. That doesn't become a thing. You have a contract, you fulfill that contract, that's the end of it. Is there going to be sometimes routine review of your work? Yes, but that is different than an annual review. So those were just some things that I wanted to share with you. I didn't want to do this. I didn't want to necessarily make this a slideshow per se. I wanted to be able to have a conversation with everyone. I don't know how to stop my slide share. Let's see. Show chat. Oh, there's something in chat. I tell my husband he's my unofficial CTO. I love that. I love that. All right, I'm stopping the share. Phew, I did it. So I went through all that super fast, and I really didn't want it to be a slideshow. I wanted it to be a conversation. I wanted you to be able to come here and ask any questions that you wanted to about being a contractor, if you're considering being a contractor, if you're already a contractor. So I'm going to go ahead and let you ask me questions, but I'm always happy to talk. Ask my husband.
Hey Jen, I can get started. I have a quick question I'd love your thoughts on. Hi everyone, I'm Brooke Simpson. I just started working at Origin Editorial about 6 months ago, so I'm new to the contractor life. Previously, I was a full-time employee at a medical association. So I'm just getting used to this new way of working and way of thinking. It's a whole new mindset now, and I'm loving it. But I am sort of getting used to working with, I have a contract right now with another medical association, so I'm working with full-time employees there. I'm a managing editor for one of their journals, so I work with a lot of people like editorial assistants and in-house editors that work full-time. So they're there 9 to 5 every day. And I find myself feeling like I need to do the same, even though I am a contractor. I feel like I should be there 9 to 5 every day, just like they are, because they expect me to be online. I'm struggling with saying it's okay for me to step away and take my kids to school or go to a doctor's appointment,
Yep.
even though I know that's part of my contract and the person I report to knows that I set my own hours. It's a struggle for me to step away
Yep.
from my computer. So I'm curious to know if you have any sort of advice or thoughts on that topic.
Yeah, 100%. I totally get that. I'm a big talker, Betty Crocker, but I will sit here from 7 to 7. So I am
Yeah,
available during normal business working hours, but sometimes they'll work it into your contract that you have to be available during business hours. If that is not in your contract, then lean right into that. Do not. So the best thing to do, and I will say this personally has taken me years to be able to do, sit on your response. Do not respond immediately. You don't have to. Other
yeah,
people don't. Why do we feel like we have to? You don't have to is respond immediately. Get them used to a 2-hour response. Get them
right,
used to an hour response. So you need to it's all about your thinking and not about theirs. Because if you don't respond immediately, they're going to be okay. What I do is when I'm writing things, I do it late at night because I do that on purpose because I don't want to hear back from them immediately.
right.
I don't, because then I'll feel like I have to get right on it. But
Yeah,
that's like a work ethic to the end, right? So it's too much. You can't, you have to pull back sometime. And sometimes you need to do the self-recording of your time. And at least as contractors, I know Origin does not do this, but other contractors will ask you to record your time. There's like time clocks on your computer, there's little tickers going on and all of that. Um, those make me uncomfortable. I know that I work hard, so I don't feel that I need to be tracked about the time that I'm working. But in the same vein, self-tracking is important, because if you took a contract for, I don't know, let's say $25 an hour, and and honestly, freelance copy editors have been doing this for years. Anybody who started out as a copy editor, y'all have been in this game even longer than me. But if you're taking a contract for $25 an hour and you are working over you're working over the hours that you have been contracted for, you have just reduced your contractual rate. So that's where you need to put your head in and say to yourself, oh my gosh, I'm now working for $18 an hour. And guess what the government's taking from that $18? They're taking a lot. I just looked, it was so funny. I was getting ready for this talk and I said, well, it's not a talk. I was getting ready for this chat, this fireside chat. And I looked at overhead on an NIH grant. I used to work as a staff assistant for the USDA Human Nutrition Research Center on Aging at Tufts University. And it was 37.5% overhead for an NIH grant, right? That was a long time ago. I looked at it last night. It is 52% for overhead on an NIH grant. 50%. So never undervalue yourself and your worth when you're looking at a contract. Take it and increase it. Talk to your tax accountant. I talked with my attorney and my tax accountant before I took my Origin contract because I really needed to know where I could live, where I could be comfortable in terms of paying my taxes, doing a SEP IRA, making sure that I could pay for all my bills, and then live. Because the whole point of being a contractor for me was traveling. I wanted to be able to travel. So I've got 2 computers. This is my other computer, and I love my other computer, and I take that with me on the road. And off I go. I keep this computer here all the time, and I let this computer sit here, and this computer comes with me. Although I would advise a very sturdy cover for your computer, because I drop it all the time. I literally drop my computer on the ground at the ice rink, and that's not okay. I've broken more than one, but it has to be a little one too. So if you're on the road, I would suggest something like a Chromebook, even like a really cheapy deepy computer, so that you're not spending a ton of money for that one. But I go to the rink every single day. I only take a meeting between 8. I'll go early though, so I don't mind. I'll only take a meeting between 8 and 2. After 2, I don't meet. You're not getting a meeting out of me after 2, because I'm on the road. I'm taking my kid to skating. The whole benefit of me being a contractor is that I can take her to the rink, or I can pick her up from school. That's been important to me. So you set those parameters, Brooke. Don't let that, and don't veer from it, because it's about what you think instead of what they think. They're going to be fine. They're going to be fine when you're not there. And set up an office hours with them to say, all right, your time to ask me a question is between 8 and 10 on, Monday through Friday if you want. And that's when I'm definitely going to be here. Or 8 and 9, 2 to 3, whatever works for you. I think that's really what's important. And then you start to reap the benefits. Then you really start to feel to yourself, oh my gosh, I'm getting something out of this, instead of all the benefits, because you lose benefits 100%. I had to fund my own healthcare for years. I had to go to in Massachusetts, we had there's federally funded now healthcare since President Obama, but before that, we actually had it in Massachusetts. So you are required to have healthcare. And so I had to fund my own. My husband actually has healthcare now through his job, and he's just wondering when he can retire. And I keep telling him not anytime soon, but the healthcare was the biggest thing because of my kids. And then kids stay on your healthcare until 26 now. When did that happen? So, but I think that the healthcare, and then if you're able to fund a SEP or something, that's always great. If you want dental, if you want vision, all that's separate. If you want accidental and death and dismemberment policy, I get my policy through AAA, my life insurance policy. I purchased that actually through AAA, but if you do form a small business, you can go through the Small Business Administration in order to get your own insurance that way. But the rest of it, I don't find to be useful. I don't carry life insurance like on my children. Like some employers will allow you to have insurance for the rest of your family, but I'm kind of self-insured for my children. And then there's dental, vision. He gets that through his work too. I just jumped topics there completely, but I thought that was interesting and important.
Yeah, no, just kind of to go off of that, Jen, I think for me, I transitioned to full-time contract with Origin about 1.5 years ago after being employed full-time at a medical society and then at a hospital location. So it was a big transition. And I think all of those things you're talking about, the health insurance and retirement benefits and taxes, and it's the way, at least in the US, like that's how the society is built, is that everything comes from your employer. So it really is, it's just a completely different way of thinking and it took a little bit for that mind shift to happen of, wait, I can actually just do that for myself. I don't actually need an employer to provide all of these things. But they don't, like, it feels like a secret. Like they don't tell you this. They want you to go, and just do the normal, which I have done for many years, just be an employee. And sure, it's easy, they present you with a plan of, here's your 3 health insurance options. Here's your, this is your 401k option. This is what we're giving. And it's all set. And yet there was definitely like a lot of research I had to do. I spoke with Jen, I spoke, with Christy, I spoke with a lot of different people about it. The tax thing, doing your own taxes is a completely different thing, because when you're paid as a contractor, you just get this lump sum and you are responsible for paying your taxes. So like that's, again, kind of like Jen was saying, you just have to take the initiative a little bit more and be responsible for yourself, which can be difficult, but it also, for me at least, it's been very liberating, because I'm a control freak. So now it's all under my control. And I can make these decisions, and I'm not limited by what an employer is telling me I can join or not join, or, save or not save. So there's like some extra legwork involved, but if you want that, there is like a piece of freedom there that is liberating.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Anka.
Yeah. Yeah, so I have employment at the Society for the Journal, but then on the side I sometimes do freelance work, and my struggle is, and maybe because I don't do it often enough and I'm not reliant on it, I find it very difficult to kind of judge the right balance between billable and not billable hours. Like I tend to spend more time on the project, and that kind of reduces the hourly rate that in the end they pay me. But then as a freelancer, there is this pressure on you that you have to consider the overall amount that you're asking them, because if you ask too much, then they basically, it's never life or death when your project is on the table. So then they just say, well, now actually we're not considering it anymore. So there's this fine balance between how much you have to fight for yourself and how much is reasonable to get the project in the end. What's your response to this?
Well, I'm as guilty as you, Anka. I will take on, and I often do project-based work too. So I'll take this back. It's all project-based. And if you talk with the United States government, or probably any other government, I'm not 100% sure, I can't speak to that, but there are very strict rules about what is considered a contractor and what is not. So I would advise you, if you're in the United States or any other country, to look at your government's sort of outline about what a contractor is. A contractor should be taking on a project, and the project should be for a set amount of time and a set amount of dollars. So, or whatever your currency is. And for me, I take on things like, I need to review somebody's peer review program, and I need to look at their system. I'm an expert user for Scholar One for EJP, and so I'm sort of the sort of default for EJP if we have something come in. So often there are projects that will come to me, and Christy will say, well, how much do you want to charge? And I'm like, okay, I have no idea. So I have started to break it down in terms of what I can, hours. The government, again, does not want you to talk about some of that. So in our own conversations, we can absolutely have these conversations, but when it comes down to writing things down, you have to be very careful about how you phrase what it is that you're talking about. But I always overcompensate. And I think that you are probably in much like a position like me in terms of where we're at in our careers. If they don't want me, that's okay. So I do overestimate myself sometimes, knowing that I might not retain the project. And for you, having another position, even better, but I still work longer sometimes. So I will fully admit of falling into the trap that probably took me a little bit longer to get that done. So what I'll do is they'll put out an RFP, and it'll say something like, we want somebody to take a deep dive into our program. And I actually have to dial it back sometimes when I'm doing it, because I get so deep into it and I'm 75 slides in, and I need to actually cut some things out, and that takes the time, unfortunately. Do I end up reducing my hourly rate? I probably do, but I overestimated it in the beginning, knowing that. It is a terrible balance that you do have to try and strike, but I would advise doing, again, that sort of that ticker, that clock, that helps you to determine exactly how long you've been working on something, and then just cut it off. I've actually had to stop working on projects because I said to myself, I'm giving too much. And they don't want the weeds half the time. They don't want all those weeds. They wanted the hot bullet points. And I'm still talking to a client right now that I did a project for in the fall, and they're still sucking the life out of me, I will say, but in a good way. I enjoy the work too, but I'm giving them an hour here, an hour there. But I always figure too, for example, I'm doing one of those mentor programs right now with the SSP, where I'm mentoring a young individual who's sort of trying to figure out her way in publishing right now. So I'm giving away hours there too. So if it's
Mm.
just, if you've only gone over by a little bit, if you've gone over by a lot of it, then I think
Yeah.
that's where you need to start to taper it back and then start to just go over by a little, but definitely record your hours. Tell me that your lawyers are not clocking you every half an hour and they're charging you for an hour probably, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
A couple of things. How do you get your projects, number one? And the other thing is, I actually was interested in this session for myself and for the fact that I'm looking for someone, and I thought we're looking for someone, my journal, and I thought that we should look at a contractor because right now it's just me, the only employee, and everything is remote. And why not have a private contractor? We don't really have any benefits. So that would be great. I'm looking for an assistant managing editor. Anybody's interested. But how do I go about, how do I go about, how do you go about getting your, getting your projects or your jobs, your positions? Do you take a whole position as a contractor like that? Would you, as a contractor, become a managing editor or assistant managing editor, or do you just do specific projects?
That's a great question. So on getting the projects, there are actually, and this will kind of tie hand in hand with any other recommendations about how you find people. So the job boards on ISMTE, the job boards on CSE,
Yeah.
the job boards on SSP, those are wonderful resources. But what I find time and time again are the connections that we have with each other.
Okay.
That is the base and the root of every position I've ever gotten, is through talking with someone, going to a meeting, attending an online meeting, sitting in on these type of discussions. That's what's so important, to make those connections. The job boards are amazing, but there are some big players, of course, in what we do. So shameless plug for Origin Editorial. They have a form online that you can fill out on both sides, if you're looking for work or if you are looking for a contractor. And Alice Allingham in the UK has a wonderful company that she actually fills plenty of positions over in her side of the world for too, because sometimes it is about the time zone. I will fully admit. Did our organizations buy into like India was very large in typesetting, and it's become, Chennai is an amazing hub and all of that. The time zone becomes a difference, though, that I don't think our editors are necessarily willing to bend on in terms of their editorial office. We have for production and copy editing in some senses, but some of that it has flowed back a little bit too. But I would definitely encourage you to get in touch with either Origin or any of the other large companies that provide contracting. J&J is out there, KGL is out there, Alice's editorial office is out there. So there's a lot of companies. And it's just a matter of making a connection with someone at that organization, seeing if they have a person to fill. But I just saw Alice post on LinkedIn is a phenomenal resource these days. I have found, as a matter of fact, they're posting wonderful job postings, because I was in their Technica in North Carolina. Absolutely, Alice. And there's just a lot of sort of freelance options out there on both sides. And I see more freelance work, more contracting work being posted on the big job boards these days too. So CSE, ISMTE, SSP, they are posting that stuff too. But I tell you, we have not put out a job listing, at least for Origin, in a long time. We get it all through word of mouth. Oxford and Cambridge University Presses has contractors. I would gather to guess that a lot of organizations now have contractors. I know Hart has contractors. I know AMA has contractors that have worked with them. Sometimes they flip them, and sometimes they'll flip them back. It just depends upon what's going on with the organization at the time. But if anybody else has any suggestions, please share them with Yvonne.
How many jobs do you do you usually do more, have a lot of projects going on at one time? Or if you have a position like managing editor, do you do several? Do you able to do several journals at one time, or?
Absolutely. Yep. And then we usually sort of couch it in, again, we're not supposed to talk hours, but you have to, right? So
Mhm.
we'll call it half time, quarter time, eighth time. So I'll give you my personal story is that I currently run about 20 or 22 journals for AIP Publishing, but I'm what we call an executive peer review manager. I do not do any processing of manuscripts.
Oh,
I'm a
mhm.
troubleshooter. It comes all the way up the funnel to me. I have about 50 people that report sort of that I work with. We don't
Mhm.
use a reporting structure, but I work with them. And then personally, I have 2 small contracts on my own. I run the Journal of the American Psychoanalytic Association, but not even 200 manuscripts a year. Love that journal. And I also am managing editor for the ACNP, the American College of Neuropsychopharmacology, for 3 journals over there, NPP Schizophrenia and NPP Digital. I would say that that keeps me pretty busy, but I do definitely take on a contract. So I keep those big things as my day job. And then when I take on a contract, I'll only do one at a time.
Uh-huh.
I'll only take on 1 RFP at a time, but I will do those, maybe do 1 of those a year, maybe 2, but then I start to feel a little burnt out because those will run for anywhere from 3 to 6 months. And I'm working on it while I'm doing my regular job. So that's usually a night job for me. So that's me. I don't know if anybody else had anything to add.
I've always found it's kind of like feast or famine. Like I usually have had a full-time employed job, but then I've done copy, like freelance copy editing for outside of scholarly publishing, like, just copy editing, proofreading since college. And to me, it's always been feast or famine. I remember when I worked at the medical society, the week of our annual meeting, I would get like 3, oh, can you proof this by the end of the week or something? And, I was like 22 or whatever, and you're like, oh, I must take this on. I have to take this on. And I would just, kill myself doing, something that was probably like, I don't know, $100 or something, So I have found it to be kind of like feast or famine with the freelance, like full-time freelance stuff, in terms of projects, and they will all surface all at once, and then crickets for months and months.
Yeah.
So similar to Jen, I have essentially what is a full-time hours wise, just 1 contract with Origin, and then I kind of pick up outside of scholarly publishing other things but I have turned things down. I had a repeat client who came to me, and I just was like, there is, between ISMTE and the full-time job, I was like, I just cannot. It was for an entire book, and I was like, I can't do this. And it was one of those awkward, it was like a friend of a friend of a friend, and I was like, I just can't. So sometimes you do need to turn it down, because I just knew I did not have the bandwidth to put the energy into it to do it. So it's like that balance of, right, trying to find the work, but also knowing when there's just not enough hours in the day to do these things.
I think you made a good point too, Megan, is that you can contract for more than 1 contractor. You don't have to limit yourself one bit. You are your own boss. Don't feel like you have to have an allegiance to 1 contract, 1 organization or another. The only thing you want to look out for is if you sign any contracts, whether or not there's any sort of, oh, you can't work for another medical publisher. Oh, you can't work for another physics publisher, or whatever the case might be.
What about time though? If you said, for example, you work 8 to 2 or whatever, would you then be able to you can't take a job that's 9 to 5 on top of your 8 to 2, or can you?
Well, only if they're telling you that you have to work during
Be
those
exclusive.
times.
Okay, or just be available during that time.
That's fine too. Absolutely. Yep. So that's the part where you have to lean into. There's 2 parts of that, right? So we work hard. We just came to this session all on our own. So you are all extremely hardworking people. So there's that ethical, like, I'm going to get my job done. But then there's that, I can do whatever the heck and I want, right? So I am the boss of what I'm doing, and my time is valuable. You need to put a $sign on your time. That is absolutely 100% important. But outside of that, don't feel guilty for for taking a day here. Don't feel guilty for sleeping in late. Don't feel guilty for going out and having fun. Even if it's, I'm going to the Y after this with my daughter, because she just came home from college, and we would like to go to the Y together. And that was the only time I said, oh, honey, I can't go in the morning. I got this thing, but I will go for 2 hours in the afternoon. And you'll see me online tonight at 9 or something, like, it's fine. It's fine. Plus, sometimes you got to go with the ebb and flow, like feast or famine, like Megan said. Sometimes it is feast or famine. I know what next week is. Next week is impact factor week, right? So next week's going to be a little crazy probably, but outside of that, this is the time. This is our time. Everybody's busy doing grading, or they just kicked off for a vacation. So lean into the quiet time.
Okay.
I just wanted to make a quick comment about I've only worked with Origin Editorial and I've only been here for a few months, but something that I have found very beneficial is that you can tell them what you're looking for and they can help you match with potential contracts. So for me, one of I forget what her title is, but somebody that works at Origin knew what I was looking for, and then a contract opportunity came in and she said, this sounds like something that would be great for you. So they're there to sort of help facilitate that matching, which is really useful. So if you were to approach them and say, I'm looking for an assistant managing editor, they can look at the contractors, and I'm sure the other companies can as well, and see who's available, who's looking for work, who has the expertise for the position, and help you make that connection if you don't already have somebody in mind. I think that's a really helpful bonus of working with a company or an agency like that.
Oh, good. I know, OUP is our publisher, and in the past they have said, if anything happened to me, they could get a contractor or whatever. But now my board of directors are like, no, let's look for somebody outside of OUP or whatever. So anyway, that's where I am with that. But I'll still ask OUP as well. But thanks for I'll contact Origin too.
Yeah, and sometimes it's a blend. Sometimes I have one contract where there's one person who, like you, who works for the organization, and then they have two contractors that, we all know the reason.
Yeah, everybody else is a contractor. All of our editors, we have social media people, they're all contractors. So, so it's just adding one more. Well,
that's so very true. And that's a very good point. They're getting a stipend, but guess what? They're a contractor. Like,
right, exactly. Exactly. They're getting an honorarium.
Yeah. It's a fancy name.
Yeah.
Carol, did you have a question?
Yeah. It's the honorarium bit. I'm currently running 2 journals for the editorial office bit. And I've been freelance for 10 years or so, but I've been running on an hourly rate, and I haven't got any paper, any contract. It's been a gentleman's agreement of by word of mouth. So you want to do the job? Yeah, I'll do the job for you. And the sort of the 2 journals are now beginning to go, oh, maybe we have something a bit formalized here. Maybe we should have a contract. So they're proposing this honorarium at me, which is effectively they're saying, we'll give you a sum of money and you fit in as many hours as is required for this job. And you're like, yeah, what happens if the job rate, if the journal expands, like they want the journal to expand, and they want this honorarium to be fixed for 3 years? Is that normal?
It is normal if you're able to get a 3-year contract out of someone and they'll pay you for that 3 years and you've contractually got them, that's actually pretty good. I would look at it that way versus the other way. But if you see that that the work may increase, but you can only follow contractually what is there. So make sure you write into your contract that it should not be an increase by more than 10% in submissions, for example, or 20% in submissions, or whatever that might be. So we have contractors with big publishers that they like the opposite. So they'll write into the contract, if our submissions decrease by 20%, we get to go and look at your staff and decide if we want to reduce them.
Yeah.
So if they can do that, we can do the opposite. So, and detail exactly what your responsibilities are in your contract, so that when they come to you and they say, oh, by the way, we want you to now populate all the reviewers and go find all their email addresses and do all of this. That wasn't part of my contract. And those are difficult conversations, but they're important ones because that's why you have that contract. And that's why it's stipulated. Usually you put an addenda at the end of the contract and it will say your duties. And those are very important. And you really should have, and I don't care if it's your friend Rachel, like it might be with me, that looks over your contract, who happens to be a lawyer. That it's important to have somebody review your contract so that you're covering yourself.
Yeah, because what I've been sort of shown is, there's the usual sort of things of this is what we want you to be doing, which is what I'm doing. But then there's also a little contract clause that says, and anything else that is normally done. What does that mean?
Cross that out. You can, you have a right, you have a right to cross it out, but I understand that you also don't want to lose the contract. So I would then probably attach some type of a time frame to it or something of that nature that, not to exceed an additional, 2 hours per week or something. I would make something up that sounded like, hey, I read this.
Very wise.
Because people will try to squeeze you, unfortunately, and they will try to get more out of you than they deserve. And the thing that I keep seeing time and time again is that, you're not gonna, at the end of your work career, nobody's gonna be like, thanks for, like working 40 extra hours every week for the past 20 years.
Yeah.
No, they're looking for the next person.
It just feels very odd to be signing up for 3 years when you've got 10% inflation and they're saying, this is how much money we're giving you and we want to grow the journal. So we're going to make you work harder. And in 3 years' time, as you say, your hourly rate ends up being crazy.
Right?
Yeah.
It does. And don't undercut yourself. I think that's super important. Don't ever undercut yourself. Like I said, we all have an amazing ethical work ethic. That was like repetitive. Sorry. Go ahead, Anka.
How did you look at, when you start, you have to kind of invest some money in equipment and while you're working, you might have an IT disaster and you might need to get an expert in. How do you deal with the cost that comes with that? Are you kind of averaging that out over every year, or how do you deal with that? With these costs that you can't really include in a contract, maybe, or like because it's unpredictable and it's you have to start yourself up before you can actually sell yourself as a business. So
right. So that's part of the pay yourself thing, right? So that's your emergency fund. That's where you have to definitely have that money set aside to be able to do that, and that's your overhead too. So if you're charging 37% or 52%, whatever falls in between there for your overhead, then you definitely have to set that. And then of course you need to write it off all day long. I write off every single meal that I eat out. I actually write off because I sit down and I talk to my family about my work and I make sure that we've talked about work. I mean, not every meal, but big meals, I write them off. I've been doing it for 10 years. I pay my children. What is the government, the rate of $10,500 a year or something? Yeah, it's totally legal. And then I don't pay them. I keep the money. All right, the government's going to watch this video. But oh well, I saw somebody say that on actually as a comedian too. Like, I see my kids. I'm like, so I think that you have to have that emergency fund set aside. But you absolutely, that's a straight, when you're buying a new computer and all of that, that's a straight deductible too, like not just So that's a good part about that. But when I first started, I actually got like my chair from my old work when I had been working, and so there were different things. But the other things that are very important are maintaining and sort of a emergency situation too. So you need to know, if your computer doesn't work, what are you going to do? You need a plan. You go to the library, whatever it is. It used to be if your internet wasn't working. Our internet all pretty much works good now, but back in the day, your internet was not
No.
always necessarily reliable. And sometimes they would always blame it on too many people on it. But I think the pandemic kind of blew all that out of the water. But
Yeah, and that
it's
makes
important to have a backup, even if it's your kid's computer,
Yeah.
to be able to run to if you need to. But I think the emergency fund is the way to go in terms of paying yourself and making sure you have that set aside. It's hard to do. Not a lot of us even do that. You just have to squeeze it out of your monthly.
I would say
Yeah.
those expenses extend to things like professional development and attending conferences or joining different organizations. When you are employed, that's kind of, maybe your organization has a budget for, society memberships or sending a certain group of people to the conferences or attending webinars. But maybe you have to go beg for the money, or they cut the budget and then you can't go anymore. So that was kind of like another liberating part of it. Like, yes, I have to pay for my memberships myself, but
You can
and I
write
can
that.
and travel to conferences by myself, but like I can make that decision. If I think this is worthwhile to me, I can make that decision, and I can, travel or attend the webinar, the session, or whatever it is, and then that is a business expense, so that then is tax deductible. So I think it's
Yeah.
just, again, like putting it in your own, you have independence over that. It's not your supervisor telling you like, oh, you can go to this, but you can't go to that, or you can be, with this group, but you can't be in this group. So it's just, again, it's like you just kind of budget. Like it's a business, it's a business, so you just budget for that.
Could you not also ask the person that you're contracting to pay for that at some times, if there's certain meetings that you want to go to that directly benefit them? Because I know, I used to work in a research institute in a medical school, and people from different Canadian Society, Cancer Society, whatever, they have paid me to, my airfare and all that stuff to come to a meeting.
Yeah.
So I don't see why
Yeah.
you can't ask first.
I think so
You
too.
absolutely
Yeah.
can.
Mhm. And
Yeah.
I will say, just my experience with Origin briefly, like they have been very good about, they offer a little bit of a discount for the ISMTE registration, and they're very, very nice about kind of, helping the contractors, make that feasible for them. So I think it's definitely worth asking in those situations. But yeah, Jen, you had more.
Oh, I pay for myself. So if it's a contract that I'm doing, there's two pieces to this that I think we're talking about. If it's a contract, so the ACMP, I'll be fully frank, it's written into my contract that if they want me to travel to their meeting, which they do, and I like traveling to their meeting, then they will pay for it. So that is written into my contract with them. But for my professional development that like Wiley used to be paying for, quite honestly, because I asked them to pay for it, I pay for it myself 100%. That, and it's gotten expensive, I will say. So I'm really grateful at times that if it's close by or if it's virtual option, I'll choose that. But I pay for it myself to go, I paid to go to Toronto on my own. It's not too far from Massachusetts, but it's expensive. The overall cost of the meeting itself is extremely expensive. And then the travel is expensive. What I did was I have a business card specifically for my work, and I get points through my Bank of America, and then I'll use those points to buy my airfare or something like that, and try and finagle away. But you can also apply for scholarships through organizations, and just tell them I'm a contractor and I have to pay for things myself, and I would love some help with that if there's discounts out there and available. I wish that there was like a contractor discount, honestly, for some of our organizations, because it is becoming more and more prevalent, right, in what we're doing. But there's options out there, but I do work it into my contract. Also, again, it's that self-value and worth of what you're doing. Now, maybe your contract is not $100 an hour. Maybe your contract is $115 an hour, because you're going to try and save that money and put it aside for a meeting at some point for professional development. Because again, when you go to that meeting and you meet up with that person that's going to potentially give you that contract that might really change your life, I don't undervalue the in-person experience, and having come through that with the pandemic, it's been really hard to not make those connections. It's how I met Jason. He happened to live in Plymouth, and I would call him up and I'd be like, hey, you want to have lunch? And I worked at Wiley and he was just starting Origin. And I didn't even think about the fact that he was starting Origin, to be honest, but we just started to foster a relationship and it worked out. And he came to me when they got the AIP contract. And I was like, what do you mean be a contractor? Like I was so mindset on being an employee for so long. And I didn't think I had my blinders on. Like I have to work for somebody else. That's just the way life is, right? And it's not, right? But the funny part is that I'd always been contracting. So I had worked on a contract for Oncogene. I had worked on a contract for another journal. And I just didn't, it's about flipping it in your brain and the way that you think about it.
Good.
Well, I can talk on and on, you know that. but I just see, let me see if there's any other things that I wanted to. I mean, the investment part is hard. I did write a blog recently. I think I included that. It might be included somewhere in the literature, but my blog is on the Origin blogosphere. And it was about contracting. It was about considering healthcare, considering personal liability insurance is probably the one thing that I would leave you with in terms of considering. Thank you, Megan. In terms of thinking about protecting yourself through your employer. You have a host of lawyers and a bunch of people who would back you all day long because you work for them. So if you made any decisions under their watch, then generally you would be well protected. As a contractor, you really need to be careful. You should carry personal liability insurance. If you don't, there's a risk attached to that. So personal liability for me, because I run a large contract for Origin, they assume that they have a contract, they have a personal liability for Origin, but that's only for Origin. That's not for you. That is not, you are not covered by their insurance. And if you make a decision that somebody may disagree with at a publisher, and it comes all the way down, trickles all the way down to you at some point, then there is liability attached to it. So I carry $1 million policy on myself every year. I can't remember how much it is. It's not cheap, but it's not expensive, I guess. Can't
Is it tax deductible?
Sure. It used to write off. I mean, it's not a straight deduction.
Well, that's what I mean.
Yeah,
You can write
absolutely.
it
Oh my
off.
goodness. I do all my insurances, because I do a portion of my homeowner's insurance. I write off a portion of my car insurance, because I drive places sometimes for work. I write off a portion, but I write off all of my liability. I think it's about $500 a year. But again, I carry a high of, it's $1 million policy. It's also retroactive. So if it's any decisions that I made years ago, your cyber policy now is different. So your cyber policy is something you absolutely want to consider because they're pulling it out of liability and they're making you carry a separate cyber policy. So that means if you touch anyone's information and pull it down to your computer, you have to be very careful. And when I mean information, I mean emails, addresses, identifying information. And a lot of, so for example, one of my clients recently started a DEIR question in their system, and it's completely separate. We don't even see it, which is fantastic because then I don't have to worry about any liability associated with having people's information. And it's sent to a separate server, and then it bounces from another one to another one. I don't know what's going on, but it's information that you have to be very careful about pulling down onto your computer. You should be clearing your cache. You should be deleting your temp files. You should be getting rid of anything that might be identifiable. And that includes manuscripts. So manuscripts that you download that is not a company owned computer. I mean, you work for a company and it's their computer. It's your personal computer and you're pulling that information down. You're liable for retaining that information, and you're liable if anybody else gets a hold of it. I mean, I joke all day long. I wish somebody else would do my work, but it's not about that. It's about them getting the information, and it's about them taking that information. And there's no culpability these days. So, we're having breaches all over the place. and nothing's happening. Something's going to happen at some point, and I don't know what it is because I don't have crystal ball, but all they do is they say, oh, here's some free software and you can check your credit or whatever it is. It's not helpful, but be careful with other people's identifiable information, because if you're retaining that on your personal computer and it is found by somebody else and you get breached, so have Norton, have LifeLock, have or whatever it is, and pay for it, and make sure that wherever you're keeping your data, it's in like OneDrive or not Google. Google is not safe. Google is not safe. So there are different, and as Alice put in, there's different insurance brokers that will help you to discover the right type of liability insurance and where you can go for that. And there's brokers, and different states have different rules too. So for Massachusetts, I own a company and I have to have workman's comp. It's cheap, but again, I say all these things, but it all adds up, right? That's another $152 a year that I have to pay for. So again, I better work that into my hourly rate.
Mhm.
So lots of insurance things to consider, but I would heavily suggest personal liability insurance, because you can't protect yourself enough from what else. And I don't know what's out there next.
I have a quick question, the remaining time, about just kind of approaching contract renegotiations, or when the contract is for a set period. So as that time comes closer, what Jen, in your experience, like what is the process? How, and I know it's probably mostly with Origin, but in general, like what is the process? How do you bring that up? Yeah.
Right. So that's a good question, because they're never going to give you a raise, without asking. Let's just be honest. You have to ask for it. I'm fortunate enough that sometimes I actually see the clients. Like sometimes you see the contract between the publisher and the client. Bye, Alice. Good to see you. Alice and I worked together a long time ago. So you can sometimes see that contract so that if they're planning for an increase for the staff. But if not, then you need to consider what the going rate is and do some research about what's happening in your space. Whether you want to ask for a 3%, a 5%, they may tell you straight away that they're not doing increases, and that's very unfortunate. But you have to be proactive about that. Nobody's going to come to you and say, "Oh, give me more money." You're gonna have to advocate for that, and you're gonna have to probably help to prove the self-worth of that too. Oh, I've been doing this, and I feel like my suggestion of this AI automation and this this workflow, we completed a policy and procedures manual this year, and I feel like my added value would definitely merit a 3% increase or a 5% increase, or cost of living has increased so darn tootin' much. I think that is a perfectly good argument these days, with numbers coming out this morning, which is 10. I don't know when they'll be out, but I mean, unemployment rates are really waffling a bit, but consumer spending has been a big discussion. I know it's going to be on the US market today, but that isn't a valid argument for an increase. But I always find it's so funny, Carol, that you mentioned the 3-year contract. Like sometimes I would die for a 3-year contract. I get 1-year contracts, and so to flip it, a 1-year contract is all I'm getting. So I'm only guaranteed for another year. I got a kid who's a freshman in high school. I got to keep going. So I think that's probably the most tenuous situation that I feel about being a contractor, is that it is a contract and it can be ended. And I've seen them end. I've seen people, and we've had to try and find new positions for people and things like that. So I think that you need to, again, work that in when you're talking about your initial contract, with the mindset that you might not be getting an increase maybe in that, especially if you do a 2 or 3 year contract, you might not be getting that increase you won't actually be getting that increase in that contract cycle, but in the next cycle, you can talk about it.
well, for me, a contract would be, it would be an improvement.
Sounds like it. Gosh, Carol, you gotta work. I know you gotta, at least when you do it, then it'll start to be a formality and it'll continue forward. Oh, absolutely, Megan. Megan put a note in there about the upcoming global event. I hope you all registered for that. I did, and I paid for it myself.
I registered too. Okay,
Good.
thank you.
Well, thank you all for
Yeah,
coming this morning.
thank
I really
you.
appreciate it. I hope that this was helpful, and please reach out to me if you have anything, any further questions. If you ever just want to talk, I mean, we could always have a coffee clutch.
Okay, great.
Thank you,
right?
Jen.
Thanks, Jen.
Hello.
Thank
That
you,
was
Jen.
great.
Good to
You're
talk with you all.
welcome. Have a great
Bye.
rest of your day.